Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the arrival of the official party. Kindly remain standing as the students in uniformed groups take their positions. We shall now have the Malaysian national anthem. For service personnel in uniform, please salute. Please be seated. Distinguished guests, past and serving members of the Malaysian and Australian Defence Forces, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Malaysian government, I would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to the people and governing bodies of Sabah for your warm welcome of those who visit Sandakan for this service. I welcome all those Malaysian, Australian, and British holders of public service. Your presence adds significance to this solemn event, and I would like to make special mention of the Honorable Datuk Johnston Bangkwai, Assistant Minister of Tourism, Culture and Environment, Sabah, come Chairman of Sabah Tourism Board, representing the Right Honourable Chief Minister of Sabah, Dr. Stephen Barraclough, Senior Official assisting Australian High Commission Kuala Lumpur, and wife Ms. Nguyet T. Chu Barraclough, Ms. Elsa Terry, British High Commissioner Designate to Malaysia, Mr. Henry Idol, President of the Sandakan Municipal Council, Dr. Dayang Siti Mariam Muhammad Hanan, representing the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Environment, Sabah, Madam Norida Othman, the Chief Executive Officer of Sabah Tourism Board, the Honourable Datuk Andrew Sim, Honorary Australian Consul for Sabah, the Honourable Mr. David Powell, Honorary British Consul for Sabah, Mr. Richard Walker, Shire President, Boyup Brook Shire Council, and wife, Mrs. Robin Walker, Datuk Frederick Coogan, the Chief Conservator of Forest, Sabah Forestry Department, Colonel Brandon Wood, Defence Advisor, Australian High Commission, Air Vice Marshal Ken Robinson, Deputy Chief of Joint Capabilities, Australia, Captain Anthony Stockbridge, Defence Advisor, British High Commission to Malaysia, Honourable Members of Parliament and State Assemblymen, Datu-Datu, Datin-Datin, distinguished guests, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. I also acknowledge the presence of the family members of those who were interned here in Sandakan during the Second World War, as well as the local Sabahans who selflessly sought to assist them. Terima kasih. Today, in solemn remembrance, we honor all those who made the ultimate sacrifice, and we stand with the families who have grieved for their loved ones who will never return home. Ladies and gentlemen, the catafalque party for today's service will be provided by the members of Rifle Company Butterworth attached to the 2nd 30th Training Group in Butterworth, Malaysia. If you are able to, please stand for the mounting of the catafalque party. I would now like to invite to the lectern Mr. Phung Ket Kyun, grandson of the late Mr. Vun Tau Yin, victim of May 27, 1945 massacre in Sandakan, to present this morning's call to remembrance.
Many remember the years of Japanese occupation as a time of suffering for several thousand Australian and British prisoners of war, most of whom endured here for scores of months, only to perish when the end of the war was closer than any imagined. For the people of this region, the civilians who live and work and raise their families here, the years of the Japanese occupation were no less a time of brutality, fear, and repression. And many paid a high price of their courage. People were forced into hiding to leave town and find safety in the hinterland. Some lost their lives at the hands of the occupiers. The penalties were severe, and the cost was felt deeply across this community. The civilians who work for the underground, shelter escapees, smuggle food or medicine into the prisoner of war and internment camps were from the Malay, indigenous, and the Chinese community. Some were Europeans, spared internment to work in vital professions. They were ordinary people risking their freedom and sometimes their lives, and the freedom and lives of their families to resist the occupation. In 1943, the underground reach was wide, and the plans bold an uprising in support of hope for Allied landing. But too many people knew they were betrayed. Prisoners and civilians alike were arrested, tortured, and imprisoned, some even executed. By May 1945, many of the Australian and British prisoners who had been held here had succumbed to hunger, exhaustion, neglect, and brutality. The camp was burned to the ground. Early morning on 27 May, aircraft and patrol boats attacked the harbor, killing enemy troops. When the attack was over, some Japanese sought revenge by rounding up civilians, among them community leaders, including my grandfather. He was one of the almost 30 civilians from Sandakan killed in the punishment for a raid in which they had played no part. For more than 3 years, Sandakan was the scene of the suffering and selfless courage. Today, we honor all who lost their lives here during the Second World War.
Thank you, Mr. Fung. I now humbly invite Ms. Elsa Terry, British High Commissioner Designate to Malaysia, to deliver her commemorative address.
Good morning and selamat pagi to all of our veterans here today, their families, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. This is my first visit to Sandakan Memorial Park. I arrived to take up the role of British High Commissioner Designate to Malaysia only last week, and so I'm especially honoured to be here today, in this place of such history and meaning, to honour those who fought and died in this area on the Sandakan-Ranau Death Marches and around Sabah during World War II. What happened here 78 years ago in the final stages of the Second World War was brutal and tragic, both for the people of Sabah and Malaysia and for the almost 2,000 Australian and British servicemen who lost their lives. This dark chapter of our shared history serves as a clear reminder of the perils of war, which, as we know, continue in other parts of the world. It also underlines the historic links that exist between our countries, and it is why today the UK and Australia remain two of Malaysia's closest allies and friends. It is a relationship that we hold very dear. Remembering our shared history only becomes more important as time passes by, and educating the next generation of the sacrifices that our parents and grandparents made for our freedom today is important. So I'm particularly pleased to see so many younger faces here this morning. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of the British government, from me personally, of thanking the Sandakan Municipal Council, the Sabah Tourism Board, and our Australian friends for not only once again bringing us together to remember all those who suffered and died here, including the courageous members of the local community who did so much to support the Allied prisoners, often at the greatest cost, but also for maintaining this wonderful memorial park as you do. We will remember them.
Thank you, Ms. Elsa. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to have the honor to invite Dr. Stephen Barraclough, Senior Official assisting Australian High Commission Kuala Lumpur, to deliver his commemorative address.
Distinguished guests, members of the armed services, past and present, and their families, our hosts, our gracious hosts here in Sabah and Sandakan, and ladies and gentlemen, all of you who are gathered here today. It's hard to describe in 2023 what happened here. So I'm going to quote three sources for the three main categories to share with us this morning. Those are the prisoners of war, the Sandakan underground, and the families back in the home countries. So starting with the prisoners of war, I give you Private Richard Murray of the Australian Army. The Australian War Memorial records of him. By May 1945, only about 30 prisoners remained alive at Ranau. Two men, Private Richard Murray and Keith Bottrell, stole rice from the Japanese to build up food stocks for an escape. When the theft was discovered, Murray stepped forward to take responsibility, knowing that he would be killed. He was bayoneted and his body was thrown into a bomb crater at Ranau on 20th of May 1945. He is buried in Labuan War Cemetery. Murray sacrificed his life to save his mate, Keith Bottrell, who became one of the 6 survivors of the Sandakan Death March. Private Richard Murray. I'd like to now turn to Ojigar Singh, warrant officer and member of the Sandakan Underground. Of him, history records the following. On the 29th of February 1944, warrant officer Ojigar Singh, alongside his men, which included Sergeant Abin of Ranau and Detective Ernesto Lagan, along with businessman Heng Juming, sandalwood trader Wong Musing, Alex Funk, a member of the Borneo Volunteer Force, radio shop owner Felix Azcona, Dusun farm manager Matusuk bin Gungao, and Captain Lionel Matthews were sentenced to death by a firing squad. When he was led away to his death, Ojigar Singh's last words to his wife were, "Take care of the children and look after yourself." Warrant Officer Ojigar Singh. For the families far away, they still held out hope. And when after the war the news came through, there was a wave of grief across Australia and the United Kingdom. I'm going to close now with a memorial published to Walter Evans of the Australian Army by his family in a newspaper in Albany, Western Australia. Deaths on service, Evans. On June 14, 1945, while POW, Sandakan, Walter Cyril, dearly beloved husband of Ida, fond father of Val and Audrey. We waited long, but it was not to be. On June 14, 1945, while POW, Sandakan, Walter Cyril, beloved only son of Mr. and Mrs. W. Evans and loved nephew of E. Jeffreys. We think of him in silence. We often speak his name. What would we give to clasp his hand and see his smile again? Walter Evans, Warrant Officer Ojigar Singh, Private Richard Murray, lest we forget.
Thank you, Dr. Stephen. Ladies and gentlemen, may I now have the privilege and honor to invite the Honorable Datuk Johnston Bangkwai, Assistant Minister of Tourism, Culture and Environment, Sabah, Sabah, Chairman of Sabah Tourism Board, to deliver the address on behalf of the Right Honorable Chief Minister of Sabah. Dipersilakan Yang Berhormat Datuk.
Good morning and selamat pagi. First of all, allow me to convey the Right Honourable Chief Minister Datuk Sri Panglima Haji Hajiji Noor's warm greetings. He is unable to be with us here this morning and has asked me to represent him and to read his speech. Madam Elsa Terry, British High Commissioner Designate to Malaysia, Dr. Stephen Barraclough, Senior Official Assisting Australian High Commission Kuala Lumpur, Mr. Henry Idol, the President of the Sandakan Municipal Council, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Today marks the 70th anniversary of the end of the war in 1945. The loss of brave Allied soldiers lives on in the minds of family members. This morning, let us take a moment to reflect on their sacrifices. As we remember the long departed men of courage, we also remember the local communities who risked and lost their lives in helping the Allied soldiers. Let us honor them as well as the rest of the individuals as heroes. And in doing so, let us reflect on the deeper understanding of peace and that war and conflicts do nothing but destroy. War must not happen, and our desire for peace must transcend through the times. This morning, we are also joined by family members and relatives of the perished prisoners of war. We acknowledge your fallen family members and relatives. We are grateful, and we will always remember them for their sacrifices and their contribution in keeping the peace in our home. Sabah will be your place of remembrance. Holding this date in remembrance annually will certainly bring Australia, Britain, and Sabah closer together. Sabah, and specifically Sandakan, will always welcome you and your families. Ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to acknowledge the efforts of the Sandakan Municipal Council, Sabah Tourism Board, and the organizing committee for their continued dedication in honoring these fallen men and keeping their stories alive. It is highly crucial that we, as well as our children, are reminded of this part of history to know what we have lost and the freedom that we have gained in return. In closing, a special thank you to the Australian and British High Commission in Malaysia for your continuous support in ensuring this parcel of history is remembered and commemorated together. May we continue to remember the shared history of our nations here in Sandakan, Sabah, lest we forget. Thank you.
Thank you, the Honorable Datuk Johnston, representing the Right Honorable Chief Minister of Sabah. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we shall have the poem recital. Allow me to introduce to the lectern Miss Amanda Rose Ong, great-granddaughter of the late Andrew J. Pereira, government printer and member of the Sandakan underground movement, executed on May 28, 1945 at mile 17, Sandakan, to recite the first poem entitled Sandakan.
The air is warm and still. Up my spine there runs a chill as we enter through the gates at Sandakan. Here we come on Sandakan Day, honor those who had no say. This place was hell on earth for every man. Through the ghostly pre-dawn light, in my mind I glimpse a sight of the camp here in those darkest days of war. Those spirits come a-sailing, with courage yet unfailing, brave, wretched souls who walk this earth no more. None would be left alive, not a single soul survive, to tell the world what horrors happened here. Escape right now they must, in providence to trust, Some Allied soldiers surely must be near. That 6 men did survive, made it out of there alive. A miracle, they reached their homeland shore. Mates who lay along the track, a bullet in the back, no chance for them to even up the score. The price of war is paid by men whose bodies laid forever in some far-off foreign land. Men who made it home, but daunted, with mind and body haunted by the horrors at the hand of fellow men. All we who were not there, the suffering to share, how can we ever hope to understand? Let us remember, yet never ever to forget, what happened at the place called Sandakan.
Thank you, Miss Amanda Rose Ong. And now I would like to invite Mrs. Jenny Robertson, niece of the Sandakan prisoner of war, Corporal Cyril Morris Mervyn Gannenberg, to recite the second poem entitled The Teardrop Pearl.
The passing years do not erase scars from horrendous days by black-hearted samurai with barbarous ways. Yet time's layered swirl flowed to encurl such bitter memories within a priceless pearl. Hardened in the fires of war, prison camps from Singapore are jewels shaped, it shines for men who are no more.
Thank you, Mrs. Jenny Robertson. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to invite to the lectern Mr. David Ng, grandson of Ng Shi Hwa, victim of May 27, 1945 massacre in Sandakan, to deliver the Malaysian Reminiscence.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am David Ng, grandson of Ng Shi Hwa. I never met my grandfather. As a child, I heard he was killed by Japanese soldiers during World War II. Later, I found his name on the Sandakan Massacre Monument. In 2019, I discovered more insights about my grandfather in Professor Danny Wong's book, One Crowded Moment of Glory. My grandfather served as Chinese secretary at Harrison and Crossfield and was part of the Sandakan Chinese Chamber of Commerce. He played a crucial role in establishing the China Relief Fund during the Sino-Japanese War. The British Chartered Company started the North Borneo Spitfire Fund on July 25, 1940. My grandfather was one of its 5 committee members who successfully collected enough donations to acquire 2 British Spitfire supermarine fighter planes named North Borneo 1 and 2. In another book, my aunt, Ng Xiuman, revealed that our ancestral home served as a base for planning war efforts to support China, with women coming to the house to sew clothing for the Chinese soldiers on the mainland. On 27 May 1945, in retaliation of an Allied attack, the Japanese rounded up 27 prominent citizens of Sandakan, including my grandfather, Ng Shi Hwa. They were later executed that night. My curiosity about my grandfather keeps growing. Professor Danny Wong's book provides the first substantial document-based information about my grandfather. And I believe more undiscovered documents await. By serendipity, I met William Ko, Datuk Chan Chiu Lun, Johnny Lu, and Catherine Chua, who played a part in connecting me to the heart of this historic event in which my grandfather was involved. I thank you all. In closing, I would like to end with this. Amidst this crowded moment of glory, countless unsung heroes remain unheard of, including my grandfather and those who perished. I hope their story finds its rightful place one day. Perhaps a compelling movie could vividly depict the despair and horror of this historic moment mere months before the war ended, offering new perspectives on the war and serving as a poignant reminder for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. David Ng. Now I humbly invite Miss Yolandi Growenwood, grandniece of survivor Mr. Nelson Short, to deliver the Australian Reminiscence.
Selamat pagi. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am deeply grateful to be here today speaking about my granduncle. He was my grandmother's little brother and my mother's uncle. Private Nelson Alfred Ernest Short was born in 1917 in Sydney. He was one of 12 children. In July 1940, he quit his job as a cook and joined the army. He was posted to the 2nd 18th Infantry Battalion, and in January 1941, just 4 days before he sailed to Malaya, he married Gladys Graham. Nelson spent a year on garrison duties before the Japanese attacked in December 1941. When Singapore fell, he became a prisoner of war. In April 1943, he was transferred to Sandakan with E-Force. Nelson was a respected prisoner of war. Blessed with a beautiful singing voice, he made a ukulele from scraps of wood and wire, with which he kept his fellow prisoners entertained, keeping up morale during some of the darkest days of their captivity. The words of "I Was Dreaming of Australia," a camp favourite, have been immortalised on a granite tablet at the Kundasang War Memorial. On the 29th of May 1945, Nelson left the Sandakan with the 2nd Death March, although he was sick enough to remain. He recalled, "When we set off, I was swollen up to the waist with beriberi. I had ulcers on my feet and the sinews of my toes were hanging out. I was so sick that a Japanese guard advised me not to go on the march, but to wait behind with the 130 that were too sick to march. But I knew what would happen to them, so I set out with the rest. The prisoners were so weak that the march across 260 kilometres of gruelling terrain to a camp 8 kilometres south of Ranau took a month. Anyone who could not keep up was shot. Nelson was one of just 183 out of 536 to finish the march. On 7 July, there were just 100 left alive when he escaped with fellow prisoners Dick Moxham, Keith Bottrell and Francis Andy Anderson. Suffering from dysentery, beriberi and malaria, they were sheltered for 7 weeks by the local Dusun villagers, who daily risked their lives to help them. Anderson did not survive the ordeal, and the 3 men were more dead than alive when rescued by Australian commandos on the 24th of August. Nelson was one of only 6 to survive the death marches. After spending weeks in hospital, he discharged from the army and took up a position with the New South Wales Water Board. The hasty marriage did not last. Nelson had came back a changed man. He later remarried, but being a survivor was a heavy burden, and the stories told by my grand-uncle rippled through the family over the years. I stand here as a serving member of the Australian Army, which I joined 2 months before Nelson died from a heart attack in October 1995, and I am proud to be here. In closing, today is about all those lying in graves marked, known unto God. It's about the young people lost, the villagers, the voices that have fallen silent, and the survivors who carried their horrific memories for the rest of their lives. It's about remembrance and sacrifice. Sandakan Day reminds us of what our prisoners of war and so many gallant local people went through and how they suffered. We will remember them.
Thank you, Miss Yolandi Grownwood. Now it is my honor to invite Captain Anthony Stockbridge, Defence Advisor, British High Commission to Malaysia, to deliver the British Reminiscence.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, selamat pagi. My name is Tony Stockbridge. I'm a captain in the Royal Navy and I am the British Defence Advisor at the British High Commission in Kuala Lumpur. It is my genuine privilege to have been asked to say a few words in reminiscence of the 641 British personnel who so tragically and cruelly lost their lives in those terrible months in 1945 over the course of the 3 phases of marches, now known as the Sandakan Death Marches. Today, I would like to remember Sergeant Thomas Harold McDermott, Royal Air Force. Tom McDermott, known as Mac, was born at the Mill Hill Barracks, North London, on the 18th of April, 1905. He came from a family of 5 brothers and 2 sisters who were extremely close-knit. In 1925, at the age of 20, Tom joined the Royal Air Force as a carpenter-fitter and spent 4 years in Egypt and Sudan. On his return home in January 1931, he married his sweetheart, Lily, and left the RAF. In 1933, the couple had a daughter, June. Tom was a devoted husband and father and spent as much time as possible with his wife and daughter. During the Depression, he had a small wireless repair business in Romford, Kent, but it was closed down for redevelopment and he could not afford the rent of the council shop they offered. After being out of work for almost a year, he moved the family to Braintree, a small market town in Essex, where he worked for Crittall Windows until August 1939. In order to make a little extra money, Tom had joined the RAF Reserve and was called up just before the outbreak of the war. He sailed for Singapore in 1941. His extended family, which had spent every Christmas together since Tom was born, said they would all spend Christmas together again when he returned. In 1942, Tom, who was captured in Java after the evacuation of RAF personnel from Singapore prior to its fall, was transferred to Singapore. It was only temporary, and in October that year he was sent with a party of about 800 British to Jesselton to build an airstrip. He was assigned POW number 2314. The POWs were housed nearby in the native jail at Batu Tiga, and the officers in the Victoria barracks. Malaria was rife, and the death toll high. In April 1943, the 700 surviving prisoners of war were transferred to Sandakan. After spending several months housed in huts near the airstrip, they were transferred to a compound in the Australian camp at Mile 8, where they remained until April 1945, when they were moved into the Australian compound. Tom left Sandakan on the 2nd of March, on the 29th of May 1945, and was one of the 38 British to reach the last camp at Ranau after a taxing trek of 28 days. However, there was no relief at the new campsite. On the 27th of July, Tom died from the combined effects of starvation and malaria. He was buried in a shallow grave on the hillside to the east of the hut. Post-war, all remains in this cemetery were recovered and reburied at Labuan War Cemetery. None were identifiable to any individual. Tom and all his comrades lie under headstones in Labuan inscribed, "Known unto God." Along with all British prisoners of war who died in Borneo and for whom there is no identifiable grave, Tom is commemorated in Singapore, not Labuan, on the memorial at Kranji War Cemetery, where his name is engraved on the memorial on panel 451. He was 40 years old. Tom's extended family never again gathered to celebrate Christmas, lest we forget.
Thank you, Captain Anthony Stockbridge. Ladies and gentlemen, now we shall have the roll call of the fallen. I invite descendants of those local Sabahans, Australians, and others who wish to honor a relative lost here in Sandakan, Ranau, or on the Death Marches to come forward to the microphone, state the name of your relative and your relationship to them. After doing so, please take a tribute from the ceremonial staff member and stand in front of the obelisk.
My father-in-law, Koo Kim Chung.
Msewa, my grandfather.
Andrew J. Pereira, my great-grandfather.
Cyril Maurice Mervyn Gannenberg, my uncle.
Private James Midgley, my uncle.
My father, Ernesto Lagan.
My grandfather, Mr. Wun Tao Yin.
Private Henry George Wells, my great-great-uncle.
Andrew Justin Pereira, my grandfather.
My grandfather, Nsewa.
My grand-uncle, Private Nelson Short.
Ladies and gentlemen, you may lay your tributes. Thank you. You may now return to your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall now have the official wreath laying. I would now humbly invite the following officials to place the official wreaths. To lay the first wreath, I invite the Honorable Datuk Johnston Bangkwai, Assistant Minister of Tourism, Culture and Environment, Sabah, come Chairman of Sabah Tourism Board, representing the Right Honorable Chief Minister of Sabah. Dipersilakan, Datuk.
Night will give us cover. It's our only chance to go. Put some miles behind us. We have to get away. 'Cause they'll shoot us if they find us, or shoot us if we stay. And Harry says he's not coming. He won't make it out tonight. Harry says he's not coming. He'll be lucky.
I now invite Dr. Stephen Barraclough, Senior Official assisting Australian High Commission, Kuala Lumpur.
Take his boots if it helps you plan. Try to get out and tell the world about Sandakan. 160 miles of hell, 2,000 forced to trek. Carrying rice they couldn't eat.
Now I humbly invite Miss Elsa Terry, British High Commissioner Designate to Malaysia.
Don't dare fall, they'll shoot you where you lie. Every step of the way you see another brave man die. And Harry says he's not coming. He won't make it out.
Next, I invite the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Environment, Sabah.
He'll be lucky to see daylight. Harry says he's not coming. Tell his mum where he made his stand. You have to get out and tell the world about Sandakan. The rumors had been flying.
I now invite Mr. Henry Idol, President of the Sandakan Municipal Council.
Forsaken by MacArthur, butchered by the Emperor's sons. You can't break a man who died for his mates, and with defiant grace face the keeper of his fate.
Next, I invite the Sabah Tourism Board. I now invite Colonel Brandon Wood, Defence Advisor, Australian High Commission, on behalf of the Chief of the Australian Defence Force.
Survive. Not much you can say to a mother who's lost her only sons.
Next, I invite Air Vice Marshal Ken Robinson, Deputy Chief of Joint Capabilities, from the men and women of the Australian Defence Forces.
He won't make it out tonight. Harry says he's not coming. He'll be lucky to see daylight. Harry says he's not coming. Don't forget him if you can.
I now invite Captain Anthony Stockbridge, Defence Advisor, British High Commission to Malaysia.
And Harry says he's not coming.
Now I invite Mr. Richard Walker, Shire President, Boyabrook Shire Council.
The sun is setting swiftly on the hills of Borneo. The night will give us cover. It's our only chance to go.
Ladies and gentlemen, with that, thank you very much, and we conclude the official wreath laying ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall now have the Ode of Remembrance. If you are able to, please stand for the recitation of the Ode of Remembrance by Colonel Brandon Wood, Defence Advisor, Australian High Commission, Kuala Lumpur. Please remain standing for the last post. 1 minute silence and the rouse.
They shall grow not old, as we that remain grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them, lest we forget.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the Australian and British national anthems. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, the final part of our service is the laying of private wreaths and floral tributes. For those who are not laying a wreath, I kindly ask you to remain in your seats. For the first private wreath, I humbly invite the Honourable Miss Vivian Wong She Yi, Member of Parliament, Sandakan.
The sun is setting swiftly on the hills of Borneo. The night will give us cover. It's our only chance to go. Put some miles behind us. We have to get away. 'Cause they'll shoot us if they find us, or shoot us if we stay.
I also invite the Honourable Datuk Frankie Poon Ming Fung, Assemblyman for Tanjung Papat.
Make it out tonight. Harry says he's not coming. He'll be lucky to see daylight. Harry says he's not coming. Take his boots if it helps you plan. Try to get out and tell the world about Sandakan.
Next, I invite the Chinese Chamber of Commerce.
Forced to trek, carrying rice they couldn't eat, 60 pound around their neck. Don't dare stumble, don't dare fall, they'll shoot you where you lie. Every step of the way you see another brave man die.
And now, for those who wish to pay your respects with a private wreath or tribute, please come forward at this moment.
He'll be lucky to see daylight. Harry says he's not coming. Tell his mum where he made his stand. You have to get out and tell the world about Sandakan. The rumours had been flying. The war is nearly done. Forsaken by MacArthur, butchered by the Emperor's sons. You can't break a man who died for his mates, and with defiant grace face the keeper of his fate. It's a hot day in Borneo, but there's a chill on the Great Divide. The Southern Cross is calling, only 6 men survive. Not much you can say to a mother who's lost her only sons. The torture and misery, starvation and the guns. Harry says he's not coming. He won't make it out tonight. Harry says he's not coming. He'll be lucky to see daylight. Harry says he's not coming. Don't forget him if you can. And all of the men who were wasted at Sandakan. Harry says he's not coming.
Thank you all very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the service will conclude with the dismount of the catafalque party. Please stand. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of the Sandakan Day Memorial 2023. On behalf of the Sandakan Municipal Council and the Sabah Tourism Board, I express my heartfelt gratitude to everyone involved in making this service possible. Your contributions have made this memorial truly meaningful and respectful. I extend our thanks to the manager and staff of the Sandakan Memorial Park, the Department of Veterans Affairs Australia, members of the Australian and Malaysian Defence Forces, the Sabah Forestry Department, the Duchess of Kent Hospital, the Scouts and Girl Guides Associations, and the Red Crescent Society, and all our readers for their participation in and support of this morning's service. On behalf of all those involved in making this service a success, I thank you for joining us here today. For your information, refreshments will be provided at the pavilion ground in approximately 10 minutes after the official photographs have been taken. You are all cordially invited for the refreshment. And now, could I please request that you remain seated as the official party stand and make their way down to the pavilion ground for official photographs. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, thank you all for being part of this meaningful occasion. Have a pleasant day ahead. To our visitors from outside Sabah, safe travels, and may you enjoy your stay here in Sandakan, Sabah, Malaysian, Borneo. Thank you. Sabah Maju Jaya.